So welcome to another episode of From the Studio. Stories from the world of product design, innovation and more, all wrapped up in a podcast. My name is Nick Bramley and I'm your podcast host. I'm delighted to be joined from the studio co-host Richard Hall. But our guest today, most importantly, is Sarah Hex. Sarah is the Business Development Manager for Mercia Asset Management Plc. And Sarah is going to explore with us funding options for small business and for startup innovation. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Sarah, and welcome back, Richard.
Hello, welcome. Thank you ever so much for inviting me.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so let's crack on, shall we, Sarah? I always look at my LinkedIn profiles of the guests that we've got on, and you've got a tagline I absolutely love. It says, supporting business growth from seed to exit through debt, venture or growth capital. As I say, I absolutely love that. It captures a lot. What does that actually mean to our audience? You want to give us a brief overview of that in context of anyone listening or watching, and particularly around the sort of Mercia piece? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Nick. It's good to see that you're cyber stalking well. I think that's great. But yeah, I mean, it didn't take me long to put that tagline in place, but it is a bit of thought that goes into that. And I think it actually, like you say, sums up a lot of what I hope that I bring to Mercia, but what Mercia is all about as well. So I think just to sort of put some context into it, when a business decides it's going to need some funding, it's a massive decision that they've just made. And I think it can be undervalued sometimes as to what that process looks like and what they've already gone through to decide that that's their next step. So what we do, it really is, yes, we can give funding that starts from seed, pre-seed even, all the way through to the exit of a business. So it's whole reason for needing the funding and that growth that it's just about to go through. But actually what we hope we give is a little bit more. So it's that added extra if they need support in any other way. And it may be just making connections. It may be that they're looking for a non-exec, and we've got a great pool of connections that we can use for that as well. So when it says giving support, it's not just about the financial support, albeit I do know that that's a big decision. And I hope that we kind of mean that we give support in making that easier, because it's not an easy process as it's been in the past, but hopefully that's changing as well.
Well, I suspect a lot of people see it first and foremost as financial, but it's already interesting, I think, to the audience that it's much more than that. And it's a wraparound of, like you say, non-exec or pointing in the right direction or opening your networks and that kind of thing. I guess as a business development manager, you're really well networked and plugged into the region of that you cover. Would that be a fair assumption, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely. And I've been working within the regions as well for quite some time. So Yorkshire, born and bred, had a little distant moment where I left it, but I came back. So yeah, definitely my network. And I think as well as that builds, your network can be anything from, professional network to the person who lives next door to you. And it's really just that portrays exactly what we're about. That sort of support is not just, I'll go to Sarah. It's I'll go to Sarah because I need growth and I'm looking for growth and I don't know what my next step is. So yeah, I hope that sort of is how we portray exactly, and I do definitely, as to how we can help and support a business.
Excellent, good to see. What I would say is that we've been through quite a bit of turbulence, haven't we? Particularly in the funding areas, Brexit, UK funding being withdrawn from what we've traditionally seen as, European ERDF type stuff. SME communities have tapped into that for many years. Where do you see the funding landscape right now, and where do you see it over the next sort of 2 or 3 years? Are we going to settle down into something different? What's the outcome as you see it as a professional in this particular sector, Sarah?
Yeah, I really think that we have to have investment within the regions over these next few years. That there has to be. I think it's been evident for way too long that the regional funding needs to continue and develop, because that golden triangle has had plenty, and we need it outside of that triangle. And one of the things that Mercia has in its strapline is about the thriving regions and its investment within regional funding and regions, businesses within the regions. And one of the best examples of that is our commitment towards the regional funds that the British Business Bank have put out. So we manage the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund here in Yorkshire and Tees and Humber. We've got the Midlands Engine Fund, North East Venture Fund. All of those are varying funds that we manage, and they will continue. Room, you know, they are not going anywhere. There's a lot of capital out there to deploy. There's a lot of investors with a lot of capital to deploy, and we're one of them. You know, we've not just got those regional funds, we've got our own EIS, we've got our own VCT, and they will continue to go ahead and raise funds going forward as well. So I think it's going to continue. I think we've got a great platform with the capital there to do it. Out of every good recession comes a lot of entrepreneurs. I think there's been a lot of life-changing moments for people this last 18 months where they've decided that they want something different and they want to go ahead and do that business that they've been thinking about, or they've had a bright idea sat in their bedroom in the middle of a lockdown. So I think there's a lot of funds to deploy, more than we think. And I think there's also going to be a lot more commitment, especially British Business Bank. They really do talk the talk and put the money where the mouth is about that support. And I think it'll be more and more within the regional funding as well.
That's good to hear. I'm sure the people listening to this probably is thinking about looking at a different place to where they might have looked before, but the fact that there's money available and funding available and support. So question to Richard, really. Obviously, you run an innovation design studio, you work with clients, and obviously you've got your own business at PDM to consider. What's your view of the funding landscape over the last, well, certainly 12 months as a result of post-Brexit, but also, you know, your view of confidence with your clients that you're talking to around getting projects up and running and off the mark?
Yeah, I think post-Brexit, there are some changes. So as you say, ERDF funding is starting to be phased out, and maybe even Horizon 2020. I think us as a consultancy, we've not really felt that many reverberations about it. I think it's probably because we are relatively small in the whole scheme of things, but also there's a high proportion of our client base which are commercial and therefore privately fund the work. I think if we were a lot more heavily involved in the startup space, we would feel it, probably feel it a bit more acutely. But I think that I agree in that now that this funding from other sources is starting to kind of be relinquished, I think this is a really good platform for Mercia to move into that kind of ecosystem of being able to support a range of businesses, which also include startups. Okay,
I mean, in terms of things are going to change and shift as we settle, I guess. I'm going to go back to Sarah. I think the rules previously for stuff that was European funded, ERDF, etc., were quite, a lot paperwork heavy and almost like tick boxes for the purposes of achieving success in those funding applications. Will that change? You have to be a bit more commercial to achieve, as a business, the success of getting support from the likes of a Mercia or a Northern Powerhouse Fund. Are the applications going to look different? Are they going to be, slightly more focused on commercials and leverage and things? How's it going to look from an application point of view?
Yeah, I think that landscape's definitely changing. I really think as well, a lot of the investors have come together and started to co-invest a lot more. And I think that's a good example of the fact that people are thinking, even the investors are thinking more commercially, but actually they are thinking, this is a good business, we need to take this off and we need to do something about it. And in the past, I think that would have been a stray, it doesn't fit. And that goes a bit back to that ERDF ticking boxes and filling in applications and making it difficult. I think now, if it's a good business, it's a good product, it's a good team, they're going to get investment, and whether it be co-investment or whether it be an angel and we come in a bit later, we'll stay closer to them. And my only worry on that is that it's a little bit of, there's a lot of a lot of businesses that don't get that support. So there's a, you know, that's all right for the brilliant ones, the ones that we all want to invest in, and we're all on the sideline for, and we can all see it like a bit of a dead cert. You know, it's like betting on a horse, isn't it? It's going, oh, we'll put it on that one because we know it's going to win. And actually, you know, there are another 10 here that could do it. It's just that they're a bit harder. So I think, you know, I'm not saying that investing is like betting on a horse, by the way, but I think that I think that change does mean that there's a more commercial view. There is definitely that view of we just want to get the money out into businesses, into the regions, and out to entrepreneurs. And I don't think it's cherry picking. I just think that it'll be there's still a journey to go on. There's no doubt that there's a lot of boxes that'll still be ticked when an application's made. That is always going to be the case. But we saw last year that, you know, even with our Northern Powerhouse Fund, some of what the sectors that we could invest in had been lifted, and it suddenly stopped being as specific as it was. And one of them was retail. You know, we'd always been told we couldn't invest in B2C, or we couldn't lend to B2C through our debt fund. And then that changed. So I think there's definitely more conversations, and definitely more open to having those conversations to say, actually, this is commercial. We need to make this a bit easier for the end user. But I'm sure there's still a lot of paperwork out there.
I would imagine regulation, compliance and paperwork are always going to be part of your life and the life line for support, really, Sarah. Do you want to explain to the audience for us, Sarah, the term asset management? What's asset management about, particularly when you think about growth or supporting innovation or raising funds and things? And maybe what kind of assets would a business be able to leverage that maybe they're not even thinking about as available to them to you know, to support their ambitions?
Yeah, so our name previously was Mercia Fund Managers, and actually that's just the same as asset management. It's really just about the fact that we have a lot of asset that we manage by investing into businesses or lending to businesses. So we have a range of funds. We have 9 different funds in total. I mentioned quite a few of them already, those regional funds and the EIS and the VCT and a private equity. And we also have 2 debt funds as well. And the debt funds are the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, and then another national fund that was that's backed by Manchester Pension Fund. So, and they are specifically also for growth. So they also support growth, but mainly for those sort of longer term businesses, those historic businesses where the banks won't lend. So they're really a gap fund lender, but they're still about lending to businesses for growth. And there's been they've got about 90 in that portfolio. We've got 450 in our portfolio in total, and 90 of them are in that debt space. And do you know what, there's some fantastic stories of growth. But not only are they in our debt fund, but they may also be invested as well. So over the last 18 months, we've seen where the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme was involved, the Siebel's scheme. We actually stood in for some of our investee companies as well. So those companies we've invested in. So that sort of explains what asset management, I hope, means. You know, our plan is always to be the best investors. You know, that goes without saying, but by best, it doesn't mean the biggest amount. It means investing well, in supporting well. And also, I mentioned before about this sort of seed to exit. Our plan long term has always been that we will support them through that process. So it may be that we invest it at seed, so just as the bright idea comes about, and actually what we can see is that there's something really worth sticking to, and we stick with them all the way through until exit. So it may be that at some point we actually invest off other funds that are a bit more later stage. So we've got that EIS I mentioned, and then you go through to a VCT, a venture capital trust. And then it may be that we also bring them onto our balance sheet. So we've got a lot of in our portfolio that have been invested from our own balance sheet. So it does show that, and you know, go back to my LinkedIn profile, that supporting from seed to exit is really important. And in there, like I mentioned, there's that debt fund that might help them out if there's another pandemic, which obviously will never happen in our lifetimes. And like I mentioned as well, some of the extra stuff, you know, we run webinars and content. We create a lot of content that helps to support businesses or entrepreneurs in different ways. And Richard's running a webinar for us in a few weeks. And it's a great example. We have our own podcast as well that we're using. One of the other things that I think I love, and we started about a year ago, was as an additional support, was what we call Meet the Funder, where we open the doors every Friday morning to any new business that just needs a bit of advice about funding. And it may be that they haven't got some pitch document. It may be that they've just had a bit of a bright idea and they just don't know where to start. And it's a 15-minute slot that they get with one of our investment managers just to say, what do I do? Where do I go? I don't know what I'm doing, and I've got this idea. What's next? And 9 times out of 10, we guide and just connect and put them in touch with people that may be able to take them to that next stage. But actually, they didn't know that before they picked up the phone and we had that conversation. So, you ask what asset management is. It's managing what we've got, what investments we've got. It's looking for new ones as well. So it's continually sort of serving that seed to exit bit and continually bringing in and deploying the capital that way.
It sounds like there's a whole raft of support elements that people are not necessarily aware of. So I'm going to point this to Richard, really. You're obviously at PDM supporting innovation, product development, and quite a lot of things you're supporting might be early discussions, ideas pre-design and those kind of stages. So how do you tap into the likes of Sarah's expertise and the team at Mercia? And how difficult have you found it for your startup business? I know we don't do a lot of exclusively startups, but how do you support startups in terms of pointing in the right direction?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing that we do is we have a filtering mechanism, because lots of people have good ideas, and particularly with Brexit and COVID, there are people that unfortunately have found themselves out of work, and one of those defaults might be that they've had an idea. So our filtering mechanism is to see that it is a good idea first and foremost, that it addresses a need, that it's commercially viable, that it addresses the market. So there's a fair proportion of people that we will ask to go and do some more work before they come back before we talk to them more seriously. And I think for us, it's about then when those startups and companies are in a position for investment, or at least thinking or talking about investment, then we'll forward them on to Mercia as an example. I think there are other funding options there as well, not necessarily they are kind of public funds. So for example, if you are a manufacturer, there's something called the Manufacturing Growth Programme, which is a very, very small fund, which is basically just for the startup or the business to carry out some initial groundwork to make sure that it is a good idea. So we kind of manage it in different ways, really. I think it's all about a process and building blocks, really. I think, if you have a blue sky idea that is literally a concept in your mind, you've got a lot of work to do before you knock on the door of Mercia, because they'll be asking those fundamental questions from the outset.
That seems sensible, to be fair. I'm going to ask Sarah a question around a relationship with the likes of a PDM. So if you're approached by an innovation studio, product design specialist like PDM, does that give more weight to the relationship because we've done our due diligence before I know we said it's not backing a horse, but we've put some money on the 4-to-1 shot in the 230. If we've done that as PDM, does that give any more weight to your kind of the credence of applications and support you're perhaps looking to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, in a very brief answer, yeah, it does, Nick, definitely. I think to know that it's being touched by the likes of PDM makes it, it's when looking at a new company to invest in, there's so many things that you want to take into consideration, but the two biggest things are the product and the people, and the product is where Richard will come in, but actually the people as well, because I know that the likes of PDM will give a really good holistic view and also be good to feedback. And Richard just said then, there's a lot of entrepreneurs with a lot of great ideas, and some of them just need some great feedback that says you need to do this, or have you thought about that, and that it's not maybe perfect in its infancy, but actually could be even better, you know, if we go down that line. Absolutely. And I think that goes for us as well, you know, as investors, to be able to say to Richard, you know, we've got this great business, it just needs a little bit of something, and we think it needs the PDM touch and dust that it can put over it. I think as well, there's a lot of steering, and there's a big responsibility to any business person, or, you know, to all of us who are in touch with a startup, in touch with an entrepreneur. And I think when an entrepreneur is gone all that sort of effort and thought process of wanting to start a business, it's the responsibility of all of us who touch that business to actually help and guide them, connect them. So, you know, you mentioned then, Richard, there's a lot of money out there in different guises, different forms. And do you know what? We could sit here and probably fill 2 hours of what kind of support there is out there. But actually, it's up to us to know that and connect them, even if it's not one for us. So one of the things I'm really keen is, if it's not one we can invest in, we find somebody, or we give them a steer as to who can, or we give feedback on the pitch that they've just put in front of us. And we spend time on it, and we say why we wouldn't want to invest, not just, you know, it's not for us, thanks ever so much, goodbye. And all of us have that responsibility if we are in contact with something. There's so many programs out there, strategic growth program, investment readiness, you know, there's hundreds, and they're brilliant, and they can really help a business. So it's up to us to guide those businesses to it as well.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive answer, and I like the fact that it joins the dots between a PDM and a funding body like yourselves as well, Sarah. So that's great to see. I guess the question I've got for you, going back to you, Sarah, is because from the studio, we're all about product development, innovation. We love innovation at PDM. Where does innovation sit within the sort of Mercia DNA, really? You know, innovation can be perceived to be more risky sometimes, or it can be perceived to be slightly out of the norm. You know, do you have a view on innovation within Mercia, something that's going to be a game changer? How do you respond to an innovative approach from a funding request, as an example?
I think we have a really good network. So there is that, you know, there is a Richard in all our network, as well as you know, PDM. I think we have a great non-exec network, which I think can offer some fantastic support when they're at that point. And I think as well, we've got a great network within the LEPs, the growth hubs. You know, we talk about the regional funds. You know, we have to be, the LEPs actually invest within the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. It's up to us to work with them, but also for us, you know, they've got some fantastic resources, some great people, and some great network there as well. Innovation, you know, this last 18 months, I think it's easy to say that any business has had to innovate, do something, change how they are working. If they've got a product that didn't fit 18 months ago, they've had to do something about it, otherwise they've gone. And we've seen lots go. That, you know, those, even the simplest of those businesses that didn't have a website or an online function, you know, that had to change overnight. And I think, you know, there was solicitors without the ability for their people to work at home. You know, the simplest of businesses had to change overnight, and innovation was affecting everybody, even us at Mercia. I mean, we were lucky enough that we were all set up and just walked home, but, you know, there was other things that we had to change, ways that we had to deal with people. As a business developer, I couldn't go to events, meet people. It was suddenly you had to go online. And so, yeah, it touched everybody. And I think we manage our portfolio really well to make sure that when a business is ready for innovation or requiring it, we get the right connections and the right people there as well.
Okay, again, all good to hear. And I think it's all about giving that confidence to people who've got a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit or an innovation or a thought process, to say, look, you're not alone. I loved what you said earlier about having a responsibility to those people, however you touch that business, whether it's a positive or a negative in terms of their application, just having a bit of a due diligence and responsibility to say, look, we can help by at least pointing in the right direction or give you some feedback. So that's good to see. I've got a couple of final questions, really. Richard, projects that you're working on, we are now, as this is recorded, entering the sort of final quarter of 2021. We've alluded to the fact that it's been an interesting 18 months plus, to say the least. How are things in terms of PDM and the number of inquiries you're getting and funding requests and support from clients who are looking to go to the next step? What does that landscape look like in terms of the diary and the forward workload?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that, whilst we're in the coronavirus kind of epidemic, I think it's fair to say that there was probably a little bit of a slowdown. But from our perspective, we weren't really that impacted because we spread our projects evenly across clients and across different industries. Some of the big projects were put on pause for a little while. I think that now we've got more insight of coming out of coronavirus and Brexit, that there's more of an appetite. I think people are now rolling the sleeves up and kind of getting their hands dirty. I think it's great to see that Mercia are really getting into the thick of it as well, helping all sorts of businesses out of this. And my view is that, whilst there are funding which is, kind of fading away, such as the ERDF that we mentioned, I think that there's going to be a big impetus with investment from other sources, obviously Mercia. And I think it's really interesting times. I think there's lots of people that have got genuinely good ideas that do need that helping hand and resource. And I think that it's about, my view is that, Mercia and the likes of PDM and a startup, for example, they're working a lot closer than they used to be maybe even 10 years ago, where there's all about kind of co-creation and, everybody's got a will to succeed. And it's more about helping with that journey than just thinking about it being more transactional. So I think generally, I think there's some really, really exciting times ahead.
Just a quick question on that. Obviously, you mentioned about the portfolio at PDM being quite broad, and we cover everything from industrial to retail to medical device, etc. Are there any particular sectors that you feel are coming out of this sort of quickly and more sort of strongly, if you like, that maybe Sarah and her team are also seeing? I'll put the same question to you in a second, Sarah, as well, to see what your view is on trends and things.
I think there's a big movement towards agri-tech because people will always want to eat. I think the reality is with Brexit, of labour shortages and the maturity of AI and robotics means that there is going to be a big shift in terms of how agri-tech looks in 3, 4, 5 years time. We're still quite heavily involved in medtech because people will always be poorly and need to have interventions. So they're both kind of buoyant industries. If I were to kind of highlight two, but I think we are working on other industry sectors that are kind of more broad as well. So I think well-being in healthcare is something that people are taking seriously. So we've seen a lot of movement in terms of well-being products, that kind of stuff, and so I think there's lots of really interesting things going on at the moment.
Oh, thank you. And what's your view on that, Sarah? Are you seeing any trends in terms of sectors that are coming out of this sort of quickly and strongly, or with a little bit more confidence?
Yeah, definitely. I'd mirror what Richard just said as well. That sort of med tech, health tech, well-being. We've had some great investments this last year into a few businesses within that as well. Bioscience has always been a popular one for us. We have some great sector specialists within our team that really can look and go into the depth of the success for bioscience. Another AI you mentioned in data, I think, there's an ever-growing world there that I think we're only just on the cusp of understanding as well ourselves. So yeah, I think that's a strong one. And another one that we've seen, and Richard will nod his head here, and I've definitely seen a lot of, is gaming. I'm nodding my head because I have a son, you know, who understands exactly what gaming's all about. I think I've spent a lot of the last 18 months hearing it as well. But yeah, gaming, I think, you know, another one that we've seen a lot of, you know, it is about how the world has changed slightly. It's about what taste is, you know, what we're all looking for and what people want. And I think those that have seen that, done something about it, and seen an opportunity of this, you know, about how we've accelerated the world of online, will benefit from that as well. So yeah, we've definitely seen those growth areas, and it's an area we've got a bit of expertise in, but when you start to develop a portfolio within that space, it becomes a lot easier to also see the benefits of that in the future. I think there's also, I think you mentioned agri-tech, you know, there's some fantastic businesses out there, and it's a sector that's needed a little waking up. So it's also that gives it opportunity as well. And like you say, we need to eat, Richard. We need to eat and play games. That's what it is.
Well, if we're eating healthy, that's also the health and well-being side as well, isn't it? But
yeah.
I think the agri-tech has had a shake-up outside of its control, hasn't it? You know, there's been factors that have been thrown at it. It's had to react, and I think that's where innovation comes in, doesn't it? As you mentioned earlier, Sarah, you know, you can't sit and do the same thing and expect the same results. You've got to do something different. So I've got one final question for you, Sarah. This has flown by the way, so I apologise for this being the final question. And you've touched on lots of things that are out there and how you can help, etc. What would you say would be the one piece of advice someone in the audience who's got an idea, they've maybe sort of talked it over with a few close friends and allies and things, and they think, I'd like to do something with this idea. What would be the one golden bullet you would say, do first and do well?
I think talk to people early. I think, you know, don't underestimate how long it takes to get funding and investment and to start a business. Don't underestimate how long that process is, and take the feedback that they give and the connections that they give. And if they don't give feedback, ask for it. So there was about 3 pieces there, but that it was really just start talking early to the right, and you'll find the right people if you start talking early.
Okay, I'm going to get the same question to you, Richard. What's your view on that? You know, someone who's had the 18 months sat at home working from home, doesn't want to go back on the corporate treadmill, doesn't want to commute to work every day anymore, and has got this idea at the back of their mind. What would you say to them?
A few things. Innovating is probably one of the hardest things you can do, and starting a business equally. Being receptive. So, you know, the worst thing you can do is have the idea and kind of transport yourselves to the end game of actually selling the product or service. There's a big journey that's involved in this thing, and as Sarah said, feedback and being receptive to change, because there's sometimes the person or the company that starts the journey won't be the people that kind of finish it. So it's all about being receptive to change, you know, being open to positive criticism, being agile, and there's a high proportion where it's not actually the idea or the product or service that is key. It's actually, as Sarah mentioned, it's the people really that will deliver it.
Okay, thank you. That's been an absolutely fascinating episode of From the Studio. Thanks again, Sarah, for being a fantastic guest. Some really good insights on there. Our contact details for those who are watching this from the studio at PDM International are on the screen. We're based in Thurston, North Yorkshire, as well as city centre of Leeds, and our contact details are there. We'd love to see you being a regular subscriber to From the Studio, where we'll share some fantastic insights around the whole innovation product design with some great guests. But all that remains for me to say is, Sarah, thank you very much for being a fantastic guest, and hope you've enjoyed it.
Loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.